friends. Today I want to share a video with you about how I write poems. There are countless ways to approach a practice of poetry writing, and there are even more how-to guides and courses. While I certainly can't contend with the greats or the experts, and I'm not a writing professor, I am a lover of words and have been for 35 years. And I have built a life around this beautiful ancient practice of writing poetry. Now, no video about poetry would be complete without a shout out to Rainer Maria Rilke and his letters to a young poet. I want to share an excerpt with you now. Go inside yourself. Discover the motive that bids you write. Examine whether it sends its roots down to the deepest places of your heart. This before all, ask yourself in the quietest hour of your night, must I write? Dig down into yourself for a deep answer. And if this should be in the affirmative, if you may meet this solemn question with a strong and simple I must, then build your life according to this necessity. Your life must, right to its most unimportant and insignificant hour, become a token and a witness to this impulse. With that said, this is not a how-to video, but rather a how-I video, how I write poetry. And I hope that it inspires you as you find your own voice and create your own practice for writing poems. So the first thing I do is I read and memorize poems on a daily basis. For me, poetry is food. You'll notice I didn't say poetry is like food, but rather poetry is food. For me, I cannot let a day go by without the nourishment and nutrients that poetry provides to my life. The most recent poem I memorized, again, comes from Rainer Maria Rilke and his Book of Hours. I'll recite it for you now. She who reconciles the ill-matched threads of her life and weaves them gratefully into a single cloth. It is she who drives the loudmouths from the hall and clears it for a different celebration, where the one guest is you. In the softness of evening, it is you she receives. You are the partner of her loneliness, the unspeaking center of her monologues. With each disclosure, you encompass more, and she stretches beyond what limits her to hold you. Getting great poetry from a variety of writers into my brain, into my bones and blood, and into my conversations is an essential first step for writing poetry in my life. The second thing I do is I wait. I show up consistently and listen with intention. I stare off into space and do a lot of mumbling and murmuring to myself. And I mostly do this in my backyard, barefoot as often as possible, walking in circles. I admit I have to do this in smaller chunks of time than I would like. As a working, homeschooling parent, there is no idyllic hours-long retreat into contemplative writing. I am not Emerson, and my life is not Walden Pond. 30 minutes is a luxury and I have learned over many years how to show up and be present for those lines to come through within a few moments. And I work to remain open and available to those lines, even as I'm driving the kids to music lessons, or hanging the laundry, or mopping after dinner. One short poem that came through for me while I was on a brief walk at a local park is called The Keeper, number 1. I'll recite that for you now. There is a keeper within. She wars against you, for you, and beckons you to the place where you will not abandon your light. Though I was only able to quiet my heart and mind that day for a very brief time, that poem was generous enough to come through. It has taken a lot of time and intention, but I have built a practice of openness and availability, so the poems know they have a safe portal in me. Another thing I do is I write really, really bad poems, and a lot of them. A couple years ago, I counted up roughly how many poems I've published over the years. And then I went through some old scraps and journals of poems that didn't quite make the cut. In my best estimation, for every poem that held up and really said what wanted to be said, there were 10 poems that just didn't. And this is the good work. It is 100% necessary to miss the mark in order to write good and great lines that move us and move others. Even the poems that are contrived or forced or have the stink of ego and striving on them, even those serve a good purpose. And one of the best feelings in the world is knowing that I have developed my writing skills to the point that I know the difference between a poem that is well written, that is true, that is authentic, and one that isn't. So I'm glad when I write a poem that is bad and I know it's bad. I let it go. I bow to it, I honor it, I thank it for coming, and I love it. Those lesser poems serve a valuable purpose in my growth as a writer. And I can trust this. All writers, especially the great and classic writers, have written far more lines that ended up in the trash bin than ended up on the final page. While there is so much more I could say about writing poetry, there's actually a lot to unsay. Without sounding too pretentious, poetry writing is a mystery, and it's magical. There's a wildness to it that does not want to be tamed or overthought or formulated. As we learn forms and rules for any creative endeavor, it serves us well to remember that those forms exist for us, not the other way around. So to recap, how I write poetry is I read and memorize poems on a daily basis. I listen and wait and open myself with intention. And I write really, really bad poems. If you are interested in creating a poetry practice for yourself, I hope this gives you some inspiration. If you have questions, please reach out. And if you have insights on other elements of a poetry practice, I would love to hear those too. Please let me know. Thank you so much for watching this video, friends. Take good care, and I'll see you soon.